everyone, welcome to our live Facebook cross to show everyone how to do a barefoot trim. So we're just going to show you the basics, and we've got Dave here, the creator of Scootboots, and we've got Chevy, our little Australian riding pony. Chevy, he's gorgeous. Anyway, so Dave, you want to take it away?
Okay, thanks Annette. Okay, howdy folks, welcome to cold Tasmania down here at the bottom of Australia. So we're in the middle of winter at the moment, but anyway, we get used to that. Now, basically all we're going to do today is show you a simple, effective way to maintain your horse's hooves. This particular horse, it's 8 weeks since his last trim. I had a look before we did this, going to do this filming, and there's not a lot of growth because, as you all know, in winter time, the hooves really slow down. There's not much growth at all. All our growth is in the spring and autumn. In America you call it fall. So that's when all the growth is. So summer, when the hooves get really dry, they stop growing, and in the winter, which is this particular horse here. So as I said, there's 8 weeks. There's no really extra growth. So I've got a new sharp rasp here. So this particular horse will be able to do all the trimming with a rasp, because less is more. Once you cut it off with the nippers, for those that's just starting out, once you cut it off, you can't put it back if you take too much. So with a nice sharp rasp, it's nearly as good as a pair of nippers. Okay, Terry, so if we come in here, we look underneath. Here we can see our foot close up here. We'll just clean a bit of debris out of the frog here, around the frog. Okay, now what we're looking at here, we can see that there's not a lot of growth. The sole level is nearly level with the outer wall, but when the wall's like that with our barefoot trim, that's our objective. If with a barefoot horse, if the hoof wall exceeds the height of the sole, you automatically get separation of the white line. The white line starts separating because of the lever forces, and you also get splits. So that's the golden rule. The outer wall should not exceed the height of the actual sole. The other golden rule is keep the bars down, because the bars support the heels, a very important role, but also ground bearing weight. If the bars are contacting the ground, they're putting forces up into the hoof capsule, up in the core, and they cause inflammation. And this is the major cause, in my experience of around horses trimming for 30 years, this is the major cause of horses getting caudal heel pain, and vets and other professionals diagnosing navicular. So then they go down all this track of having all these wedges and special shoes, when a simple trim can correct the problem. So always remember, if you get heel pain, there's issue here in the back rear quarter of the foot, and it's usually called just caudal heel pain, not navicular. So okay, so we'll just bring this foot here, Terry. Okay, if we look here, this bar here is in really good condition. It's not high, it's not raised above the sole and up into the seat of corn. It's doing its job, supporting the heel, but it's not contacting the ground where it's going to cause inflammation of the corium above it. This bar here is a little bit higher, so we're just going to take it down just a little bit. There, that's all we're doing. We've removed any chance of that contacting the ground to have weight bearing. That is the big no-no. Bars should not have weight bearing. Their only job is to support the heel. Never dig the bars out, but just keep them level with the sole plane. Okay, now, so what we're going to do here, as we see, there's nothing to cut off with a rasp. So we're going to put the 45-degree bevel around the wall. So there we can see the dip. That speeds up the breakover. That releases pressure off your tendons. As soon as you get a rolled toe, it means removing of lever forces. Around the side here, these heels are too high. From the top to the bottom, we're looking at about 1 inch in depth. That's way too much. So I'm going to lower the heels, because at the moment, the frog's not getting any ground contact. High heels are preventing the frog loading, and it's very important for the health of the foot that the frog is getting plenty of weight bearing. because that works the digital cushion, which stimulates blood circulation, also shock absorption. So it's got a vital role to play, so it has to touch the ground. Okay, so we're going to rasp around the sides, taking the heel down. I'm going to take these heels down a good 5 millimetres because they're way too high. The other golden rule, which we'll speak about in a minute, the wall should never be flat. You hear a lot of people say they look down the foot like this. They're looking down, they say, oh yeah, the hoof's nice and I've rasped and trimmed it nice and flat. Through this middle of the foot here, the hoof, this should never be flat. A flat hoof, when it's trimmed flat, is the major cause of a hoof flaring. These quarters have got to be dipped. They're not intended to be loading on weight bearing through the middle of this foot here. So always remember, if you get flare, there's 2 reasons. One is you've got unbalanced feet, and also the foot's been trimmed flat. So never trim a foot flat. You look down and you get it balanced so it's even height both sides, but never trim it flat all the way around as though you're going to put a metal shoe on, because that's the wrong conformation and the reason the horse's hooves flare. Okay, so what we're doing here, we're lowering it through the quarter, which I spoke about, the widest part of the foot. It's dipping it, so it only ever touches the ground when it actually gets maximum loading. I'm lowering this heel, so I'm making sure the heels are square so that the foot's balanced. And now I'm beveling 45 degrees down through the quarters, removing that flat surface so that and you can see here the angle of the rasp, it's tipped on the side at 45 degrees. This foot has started to separate. If we could see through here, the high wall, too much loading on the outer wall, the white line has started to separate. It's got bits of gravel in there simply because of the lever forces. So beveling the wall like this, we remove the lever forces. Now I've got those heels both level. Now, so we've got a 45 degrees around the sides. The quarters here are dipped so they're not loading up, so that's going to stop our flare. We've rolled our toe. That takes the lever forces again off the white line. Also takes the pressure of the lever forces off our tendons. That's what stops our horse bowing tendons and so forth. Now, the other thing I'm going to point out, the area that you never touch is here. This area here in the foot, this is called the toe callus. Never ever rasp this area here. All these horses that have their shoes taken off, or after the farrier's been, the horses are limping and footsore, it's because this part here has been rasped. That is the protection of the horse's sole. Right above there is the pedal bone. This area's got to develop a callus, and if you rasp that off, your horse is going to be sensitive. So all those people that wonder why after the trim has been, their horse is suddenly footsore, it's because the trim has rasped off that toe callus. So leave that alone. Okay, so we've got the bottom of the foot prepared. Now Terry, if you can come around this way. Now we bring the foot forward. Now this is one of the great evils of horses' hooves. If we can see here, we can see the dip in the wall. That's flare. So flare has to be removed with every trim. If your trimmer trims your horse and he hasn't rasped that bottom 15 mils or whatever, or just left it, that means it's a lazy trimmer. All trimmers should rasp flare, because flare, if we have a look here, we're rasping that deviation off. Now flare distorts the hoof fall, unbalances the foot. Now that's all revolved. So as you can see, the walls are now nice and straight. I've rasped that bottom 1/2 inch. Sometimes if you've got bad flare, it can start higher. You can rasp flare off without making the horse footsore. There's no sensitivity in the side walls of the horse's feet. All the sensitivity is on the sole and inside the white line. So you've got to rasp the flare. Every single trim, we get so many horses, pictures sent in here to Scootboots, people wanting sizing advice, and their trimmer is totally ignored taking flare off. And that is a sign that the trimmer's lazy. Every single trim, flare should be removed. then you get a nice strong wall. You don't get splits. Splits are only caused by lever forces through excessive length and flare. So please folks, always ensure your trimmer removes flare around the outside with every trim. So a barefoot trim is a very simple trim. Less is more, as we say. This is now a nice compact hoof, ready to go again for another 8 weeks. Although when using boots, if you get a lot of growth, you should be trimming 5 to 6 weeks. But this particular time of year, there's no growth. So 8 weeks this horse has had between trims. So there we go, folks. A nice, healthy looking foot. No flare on the walls to distort the walls. And if we come forward here, Terry, again, we'll just point this out again. As I said before, this area in the toe here is a toe callus. Never ever let your trimmer rasp this area here. That is the biggest no-no and the major reason why barefoot horses have trouble transitioning. And also here on the bars, always make sure the bars aren't contacting the ground, they're not weight bearing. Their only role is to support the heels, not to load up. And loading on these bars is the same to a horse as if he's standing on a rock. You might as well strap a rock, a pebble, in here, it's the same effect. So the horse starts to transfer his weight to his toe because he's got this heel pain. The vet then says, oh, your horse has got navicular. So all the shoes, the wedges go on, the roll toe shoes, the whole lot. When a simple trim can solve your problem, it's a lot cheaper and your horse will rehabilitate and become sound. Also got the bevel again, 45. So that, folks, is a simple barefoot trim. That hoof is its functional best.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave. So if you need sizing advice, just head to our Scootboot page, sizing page, our Scootboot website, www.scootboots.com, and let us size for you. And happy scooting out there, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye from Australia.